Hello and welcome to another MovieBoozer.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and I'm joined today by Bill Arsenault and Bill Leon.
Hey.
And today, our main topic of discussion, unfortunately, will be, as most of you know from the news, Robin Williams passed away this Monday after taking his own life. A true tragedy for the film community and the comedian community as well. We're going to go over some of the films that we all have seen of his that we find personally affecting, and how his life and his works impacted us all. Before we get to that, we do have to cover the recent new release of the week that everyone's talking about, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We're going to go through it in as quickly as possible, because personally I have very little to say about that. What about you guys? Anything?
Well, why don't you lead off? Why don't you give your thoughts, and then we'll kind of build on top of you.
Okay.
We'll play Buck with you.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was about as mediocre of a action film as I could have expected to have seen. I think that the way they treated the actual turtles was not bad. There were some moments of the film that made me nostalgic for the past, but some of the problems of this movie, first of all, the editing and the cinematography was complete just garbage. Even Michael Bay this year in Transformers 4 got away from cutting too quickly, and that movie was far more coherent than the other Transformer films were. That's not to say it was good, but you could actually follow the action for the most part. Michael Bay did not direct this film, but it felt like a Michael Bay film circa 5 years ago.
Yeah, totally. There were all those off-kilter angles. There were the sweeping shots, across a room. For some reason, there was a lens glare the entire movie.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fast cutting that made it impossible to tell what was happening in any given action sequence.
Lens flare, not glare. But it certainly was a glare of a problem.
Yeah, well, the lens flare issue is something which I can't blame on the Michael Bay elements, since that's something which J.J. Abrams has made into an art form.
Yeah, in his movies, it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really bother me, but it didn't bother me.
I just can't wait until Star Wars lens flare, the movie.
It didn't bother me, the lens flare in this. It was just so noticeable, because it was right fucking there in every single shot.
Yeah.
And just even like in scenes where April O'Neil's talking to Whoopi Goldberg for no reason, it's there.
What was Whoopi Goldberg doing in this film?
It was a joke cameo. That's what it was. Hey, it's Whoopi Goldberg. Remember her?
It was. She had more than one scene though. That goes beyond cameo to just like she was paid to be in this movie territory.
I think it was still a cameo. I mean, she was only in 2 scenes, but
I could be wrong, but they're obviously, and a lot of this movie felt like they're trying to set up for a franchise of movies. Whoopi Goldberg, I believe, is just supposed to be like the J. Jonah Jameson of this universe, kind of. She runs the news channel.
Yeah, but it's Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, there's
right.
No way
I wonder what. She didn't have any enthusiasm in her character. She was just there, kind of reading her lines, and they're kind of crazy.
I can't say
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I can't say any of the main characters, except maybe for the Turtles, had any enthusiasm. Or Shredder had enthusiasm. In fact, I would say he had over-enthusiasm. But sometimes. But April O'Neil, Megan Fox, had the least enthusiasm I've seen of any actress this year. That was a horrible performance.
She didn't want to be there, and it's interesting because she's not exactly getting hired to be in, period costume flicks or anything with relevance.
Well, you have to wonder, because remember, she got kicked out off of Transformers 3 because she made Hitler comparisons to Michael Bay. And
Right.
Michael Bay produces this movie, and he has, assumedly, the authority to not cast her, but he casts her probably because they've made up and everything's all well and good. So
Well, the
was
one
that?
thing Michael Bay cannot possibly live without is a rockin' set of tits and an ass. That's pretty much what Michael Bay loves.
What's sad is that this is a Nickelodeon movie. So
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of
Yeah.
like, well, okay, that's not out of the league of possibility for Nickelodeon, just like as it's not out of the league of possibility for Disney to do. Those two organizations can be very subversive with their sexuality, but this movie wasn't really like that. It just was Megan Fox pretending to be a journalist, and it came off as the worst thing ever. It was like she was an alien, and she was visiting Earth, and she didn't know how to interact with humans.
Aliens, but isn't that dumb?
Yeah, exactly.
Because
Yeah.
there's a whole controversy about making the turtles aliens, and so we have to comment on it.
Another stupid thing in this was the screenplay. This was probably the stupidest screenplay I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, well, you could tell that they quickly rewrote the origins of the turtles, and the way they rewrote it is. How exactly does a book on ninjutsu turn you into a master? Like,
That didn't really bother me because they found that in the sewer, and it's like whatever. But what bothered me was lines like when William Fichtner's like, "Okay, drain all of their blood, even if it kills them."
yeah,
Mhm.
which is
Like,
interesting
right.
because
But it's going to kill them if you drain all their blood, right? That's usually what happens.
wouldn't you think keeping them alive and harvesting their blood would be better because you could continually produce more and more of it?
Right, it's kind of like that joke Red Letter Media did about Khan from Into Darkness. Like, his blood is magical, so why don't they just hook him up to a machine and constantly harvest his blood?
Yeah.
You know? But no, there was another line in the movie where Shredder's like, "I'm gonna make turtle soup."
No. And this is something I really wanted to talk about is
Tonight I dined
how
with
there
turtles.
that line is from the cartoon. First of all,
Okay, all right, but
The
still,
the line is "Tonight I dine on turtle soup," and they have him say it after, like, he's supposed to be intimidating. He's supposed to be badass. The Shredder in the cartoon was a goofball that constantly was made to look like an idiot. So, like, that line is perfect for that character. Putting it in this, I legitimately out loud said what, and then like kind of was like, oh, I'm in the theater, but that I was legitimately like, oh, I can't believe they did that. That was it's one of those things.
It was so out of place for that character at that moment. Like,
Mhm.
at that point, up until that point in the movie, Shredder has been built up as this, like, all right, he's the leader of the Foot Clan. He's I'm sorry, am I on? Or am I?
No,
Yeah, you're on.
My connection
still on?
is lagging out.
Okay, that's where I saw the problem. But no, he's the leader of the Foot Clan. He's kind of a threat. You know, he does that sparring session where he completely kicks that guy's ass and all that. And then out of nowhere, he's given this robotic Swiss Army knife armor. And
Which, by the way, is, in my opinion, like overkill.
it's
I
very
mean-
overkill. It's very Michael Bay.
It is, and here's the problem I have with the Shredder suit. The problem I have with it is Shredder is supposed to be, a martial arts expert, and so he wears this giant, heavy, difficult to maneuver suit that basically turns him
Well-
into just a lumbering robot.
It wasn't. He didn't seem to be having any problems in that suit. He was
Well-
flipping around and flying around and stabbing and.
Right. Well, see,
See, that's-
stabbing. He doesn't. He never stabs anyone because
That's true. That's
this
true.
is
He never does.
PG. And that's what I kept thinking. Like, why
Now,
does
this
he have
is a
all these
PG-13
knives?
movie. It's PG.
PG-13. You still
Yeah.
can't stab anyone in a PG-13 movie. Not like.
Well, you can. You just can't really show a lot of blood. And here's the thing. I thought that it was just silly. I mean, it's a silly franchise, and I can give them that. But the fact is that it's not as cool if you just slap a heavy suit on everything and say, now you're Mega Shredder, when we haven't even been introduced to Shredder, like normal Shredder.
Right. It would have been better if they built that up, and then at the end he's like this powerful thing. Either that or set that up for the sequel.
Right. Well, like they did in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, although they also failed in that. They also failed. They introduced the Super Shredder and then they let him destroy himself.
Right.
So yeah, the point being, the concept from the beginning, I think, I give a wide berth around the concept of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to be goofy and inventive. And the problem is this film tried to take itself seriously while still being goofy. It felt to me like they were trying to negotiate the difference between the need to make everything a gritty reboot and the need to appeal to children.
The thing about that is, like, this material isn't dark. It doesn't need to be made dark. It doesn't need to be made intense. Like, playing it straight is one thing, but trying to make, like, the Shredder into this big knife-ridden, death machine, whatever the fuck he's supposed to be, it just does, and then have him use lines like "Tonight I dine on turtle soup." It doesn't add up.
Right. It's a consistency problem. And
now I know
It's a big problem. Yeah.
Bill, you had said that the ninjutsu book, spoilers, didn't bother you, but that bothered the shit out of me. Because it makes the original origin story look plausible, like that could happen in real life. A Japanese rat mimics his martial arts owner from a cage and learns martial arts. That's more fucking plausible than him finding a book and learning it out of a book.
Yeah, let me put it this way. That's the equivalent of... Okay, you know what? I'm gonna start with this. If you found a mathematics textbook and you were someone who was not... Say you found an algebra textbook and you knew nothing of algebra.
Yeah.
Would reading that book on its own make you a master of algebra? Or...
Yeah, no, I see your point.
You might be able to pick it up and you might actually be able to work with it and experiment with it, but there's so much further that you have to go to master it.
Would you be able to go head-to-head with someone else that has actually had hands-on experience?
Much less an entire army of someone else's.
Yes.
You have had.
Oh, right. That's true. What I didn't get to about that fight between Shredder and Splinter was when Shredder pops in and he's doing his whole thing, he acts as if he's known Splinter for years.
They are supposed to have, but
in this
backstory they don't. So
yeah.
Now, the changes to the backstory. The biggest one for me is tying April into everything.
Yeah.
That is one of the cringiest things I think I may have ever experienced. Because
and did anyone else get a creeper territory problem here, where suddenly she's like seen as almost a mother to the turtles, but the turtles are still talking about how rockin' her tits are?
They don't say tits, but
they don't say that, but they. Oh, okay. How about the wonderful line? My shell's getting tight just looking at her.
That's funny, but
it's funny, but he's saying he's getting a turtle boner.
Right.
He's getting a turtle boner for someone who turns out to be their. You know what?
It's pretty bad. Yeah.
Before we shove off, the line at the end, which was she says, like, "What's family for?" Because they're like, "Thank you for not revealing our identity," and she kind of places herself into the situation as like, "Oh, I saved you guys from that lab, so I'm family." Bullshit, but whatever.
Oh, by the way, she got fired from her job at the news. Did she end up getting her job back, or
they don't? No. I don't think they get into it. But
that's a dangling plot line.
That could easily be explained away in the second movie. Will Arnett got me my job back, Which Will Arnett.
Will Arnett was given the most thankless position in this movie.
I don't want to speak for Chris, but Chris wrote. Hawk Ripjaw wrote the review for this movie for the website, and he said. And I'm quoting, paraphrasing, but he said that the funniest scene is where they beatbox in the elevator. I disagree. I think that scene's okay. Like that again, that was something I was kind of worried about with the Turtles themselves, is that they would end up being too abrasive or too hip. Which ultimately, with the exception of Michelangelo, I don't think they really went far enough with some of their personality traits.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Knoxville was super distracting as the voice of Leonardo, but at the same time, he wasn't like. You know what I mean?
Bother me. I
did recognize that it was him, though. Like, yeah, Johnny Knoxville as Leonardo. Turtles were fine. Tony Shalhoub as Splinter. What the fuck was going on there? He couldn't pick an accent. Splinter looks like the fucking RZA from Wu-Tang with that Fu Manchu. He's not even supposed to be Japanese, but he looks like a Japanese person.
Yeah, to be honest, I went into this thinking William Fichtner was supposed to be the Splinter. So, not Splinter,
Shredder.
So,
yeah, so did I.
So, it confused me when there were... Because even looking at credits now, I keep seeing him credited as Shredder.
That's weird, because, yeah, they are
sources?
two separate people.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to throw out, though, is what I thought the funniest part of the movie is when they have to be injected with adrenaline to get out of those machines. And then they're running around all hopped up on adrenaline. That was my favorite moment, especially with the Turtles. Like, basically, I think, like, the Turtles themselves were fine. I'm not going to say they were good. I think acceptable is a better term.
I think that there is the possibility that a sequel could sort out some of these problems, but
Yeah.
I honestly couldn't give two shits at this point. It just did not give me any need to watch another one.
I liked the third act more than the rest of the film, and I also liked the action sequence in the snow. But and one last thing I'll throw out there is that using "Happy Together" by the Turtles, I thought that was kind of cute. And also, I was probably the only person in the movie theater that got that joke.
Because they'd actually heard the song, you mean?
I don't think that. Well, I mean, everybody's heard the song, but not many people know that it's by a band called the Turtles.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So yeah,
But,
that's for those who didn't know, that's what that joke is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a...
Is there anything else I want to throw out there for this?
I'm out of things. I'm ready to cover a much more important subject to me. So.
Yeah, we pretty much got it all. The backstory, everything they fucked up.
Now, before we do talk about Robin Williams, I do want to do a quick side note on another celebrity who passed away recently, another famous actor, Lauren Bacall. I'm not going to spend as much time because even though she's in certainly a great deal of movies, her passing was, by no means surprising. I mean, she lived to 89 years old. But she was in a great deal of classic films, from The Big Sleep to Key Largo to Patterns.
Key Largo to
Murder on the Murder on the Orient Express, which was a fantastic Oscar-nominated adaptation of the mystery novel, the Poirot novel. She was in John Wayne's final movie, The Shootist, which in many ways I actually consider his finest performance. And if you haven't seen The Shootist, it's really a fantastic film. Lauren Bacall had a great life, and she was in a great deal of fantastic films. Of course, she went through a lot of difficulties, being typecast, but I think she pushed along and distinguished herself, and she was acting up until just the last few years. Her final performance was as a voice in Ernest and Celestine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, she did one of the English language voices.
Who was it? Was it the woman, the rat woman that was in charge of the kids?
Looking at it, she's listed as the Gray One.
That must have been. Yeah. Okay.
That's what her credit is. I haven't seen Ernest and Celestine yet, so.
It's nice. It's a nice movie.
Yeah, but it's a career. Her very first film credit was To Have or Have Not in 1944. So her film credentials, 44 to 2014. Jesus, what a career.
Yeah. Damn.
And I don't know if she ever won an Oscar. I'm actually looking that up right now. She had a Tony Award. She got a Golden Globe. She did get the Cecil B. DeMille Award from Golden Globes. And even though she has passed away at this point, I think she should definitely get the Irvin G. Thalberg Award posthumously. I would say she had quite a career, and it certainly deserves recognition. And not enough actresses have received that award.
I just did a quick Oracle of Bacon on Robin Williams and Lauren Bacall.
Oh, yeah?
Robin Williams was in Moscow on the Hudson in 1984 with Udo Kier, who was in Manderley 2005 with Lauren Bacall.
Ah, okay. And that's actually a movie that I'd like to discuss. So that's, I think, a good segue into the life and times of Robin Williams. First of all, before we go into that movie, which I definitely want to mention, I've already said, that Robin Williams greatly influenced me, and if you go to movieboozer.com, you can look up an article that I wrote and posted just a couple days ago. As soon as I heard the news, I typed up a quick obituary of my own of how Robin Williams' performance in The Fisher King really impacted me, and in many ways said a lot about his personality. I want to ask both of you, what do you feel is the performance of Robin Williams that in your life was the most impactful, and was there any particular performance you can weed down? I'll ask you first, Bill Leon.
I think as far as impactful, and this isn't a film role, but I think it still counts.
Sure, it doesn't have to be. It could be just a comedic performance, if that's
his 1985 stand-up Live at the Met. That CD, it's got a ton of dated 80s jokes on it, but in between there's still tons of timeless material there. That's and the way he would perform it, and the way you could tell he was going off script from his own material, where he would kind of improv on stage, and just the energy, ridiculous stuff there.
I was just watching the Cinema Snob on his website. He posted a link to a YouTube video of the HBO special An Evening with Robin Williams from 1982, and probably the first 20 minutes of this hour-and-a-half long performance is all crowd work, just him going around and just pointing at people and coming up with something funny to say about them, and not making fun of them, though. He very much making, laughing with the crowd and not at it, which is something that kind of humor, it's hard to do right. Don Rickles can insult you and make it feel like a compliment, but Robin Williams, he took a different approach. He would find something funny about someone and find a way to turn it into something. So he would point it out, but he wouldn't make it into a thing that that seemed like that it was insulting.
Right.
Sure.
So so that's from 1985. Bill, what is it called again?
Live at the Met. I think it's his first CD.
Okay.
First audio. Maybe no. There's the one where he looks like Owen Wilson on the cover. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I think he put out a CD in 79 or 80.
Okay, yeah.
Something
Well,
like
this was the one I got. I think it was at some CD stores going out of business sale. I got it for $5, and I had actually heard some of it prior, just kind of on the internet. But yeah, just that stand-up, more so than any of his other stand-ups, I think that was just full-on, relentless, non-stop funny, constant.
Yeah, I actually, it looks like his very first album was 1979. In 79, his first album was called Reality, What a Concept.
That's the one where he looks like Owen Wilson on the cover?
Yes, it looks like it.
Yeah.
1983, he put out an album which has an amazing title, The Throbbing Python of Love.
Robin Williams.
And then 1986, Live at the Met, the AllMusic Guide gives it 4.5 stars. And a album
rightfully so.
And I actually, I have not listened to his earlier albums. I've heard plenty of his early shows on TV and such. The first album of his I purchased comedically was his 2002 comeback stand-up comedy tour.
Right.
And it was actually a really good double album. What's unique about it is the first disc of the album was his stand-up show from beginning to end. The second disc was like it was kind of a tour album where it was like a compilation of 5 to 10 minute segments of him doing local jokes for each city that he was in. So you would have a track called Chicago, and it'd be a bunch of Chicago-oriented humor. New Orleans, a bunch of New Orleans-oriented humor.
Hopefully better than Billy Crystal's.
It's a damn good comedy album. I think the comedy concert itself was roughly the same stuff he did in the HBO special that came out around the same time, but I think it's a different performance.
Mm-hmm. There's a whatever year, I think you said 86, that Live at the Met came out. There is a video of him doing most of the same material, but I don't think it's the same recording.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really is a. Actually, here's a list of all the cities he does on the disc too. He does Chicago, Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Washington D.C., Cleveland, Austin, Houston, New Orleans, Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Las Vegas, Toronto, Baltimore, Memphis, Nashville, and then he does I have no idea how this happened, how this is relevant, but the last track is just called Technology. I forget what that was about, but I'll have to re-listen. I have that somewhere. Either way, I agree with you. His stand-up was it was innovative in a lot of ways.
And I don't want to undermine his work in film, but he had so much presence on stage that never quite translated to film. And not that it ever should have, because I mean that's what he did. And I think there were a lot of shows.
There were a few film performances of his that I think captured the manic nature of his stand-up comedy in a dramatic way.
Yeah.
Fisher King in particular, if you haven't seen it, it really nails that, I think. But we'll get to that later. Bill Arsenault, do you have a film or a performance of some kind of his that impacted you the most?
It's not a film or a performance. Maybe it was a performance a little bit. It was more of a... there were two things that I remember very clearly watching him in. One was a documentary on Andy Kaufman. Which featured many comedians.
I believe he knew Andy Kaufman quite well.
Yeah, and it was actually, I think it was in the beginning of the documentary. It was just a quick clip of him talking about being with Andy during the last days of his life, and then saying then he just passed away, and it was a very sad thing for him to say, but he said it with kind of a lightness. He wasn't crying, he wasn't getting emotional. He was just like, then he passed away. He was kind of like c'est la vie, and that kind of stuck with me. I like that feeling towards death. It's something that I wish I could have more often. And another thing I remember, he was on an episode of the Today Show back in, I think, the late '90s somewhere, and I remember very clearly that this was around the time Al Roker. This was before he got the surgery to get skinnier, and and so Robin Williams in this interview makes a joke about Al Roker, and it was friendly, it was in jest, but he makes this funny ass joke. I forget exactly what it was, and they cut to the reporter who's about to segue into the next thing, and the reporter is just laughing his ass off. He's just like, and then he realizes the camera's on him. He looks right into the camera and he's like, apology. I was like, dude, there's no apology. Just move on, you know. But he apologized, you know, that he was laughing at an Al Roker joke by Robin Williams. I thought that was. I don't know why. It's those little moments that I remember more. The performances were great. Don't get me wrong. In film.
We'll get into those. This is a good time to talk about.
And we'll get into those, but it's those things I remember from his.
This is a great time to talk about the little stuff.
Oh yeah.
Right, about him being him.
I remember just seeing him on Inside the Actors Studio, and normally that show was basically just an excuse for 90 minutes of James Lipton celebrating someone a little too much.
Getting
essentially
existential.
Filleting an ego for 90 minutes. That's
the
basically
1997 classic Flubber. Tell us about it.
Except Robin Williams didn't let him do that. He basically, for the entire episode, turned it into a stand-up performance. And it is brilliant. And even if you're not a fan of the show, you need to see that episode at some point. It just how little he cared to have James Lipton wash his balls. Don't get me wrong. I think James Lipton. I actually credit James Lipton for the fact that he had a lot. There was a time and a place when a lot of people would go on that show, and you would see interviews with people who were relevant. Where I take issue is I think the show lasted too long, and so they started running out of people who actually deserved having their egos washed.
Yeah, I always remember the Saturday Night Live skit with Will Ferrell as James Lipton, and he's interviewing Charles Nelson Riley, who's Alec Baldwin, and then he did one where it was Screech from Saved by the Bell.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire Screech,
and
he's like,
great.
He's like, you were in the TV show Saved by the Bell, the new class. It's just amazing.
Yeah, David Cross does a far meaner impersonation.
Well, see, here's the I was gonna bring that up, but I didn't want to get into a huge aside. David Cross's bit on James Lipton is awesome. They actually work together on Arrested Development, James Lipton and David Cross. So if you want kind of a follow-up to that bit, watch Arrested Development.
Oh, I've heard a follow-up to that follow-up.
The Mr. Show?
Yeah, well, yeah. No, what I've heard is David Cross talking about, James Lipton totally had seen his bit. Mm-hmm. It's worth noting, besides doing the bit on Mr. Show, David Cross also did a bit about making fun of James Lipton for accepting a Cable Ace Award and crying on stage. Yeah. And it's one of the cruelest comedy bits I've ever seen. Because
it's hilarious.
It is funny. I credit David Cross for it, but he can be cruel sometimes. That's one thing, to bring this back to Robin Williams. Robin Williams was never a cruel comedian. And as much as I enjoyed David Cross' stand-up when he was performing it, Robin Williams managed to be funny without cruelty. Even when he was mocking people, he only picked targets that were 100% fully deserving, and he never mocked them too far.
On Live at the Met, he goes pretty hard on Ronald Reagan.
Well, okay, but I would argue Ronald Reagan is one who deserves more than some.
Have you heard the bit? he has a bit where basically Ronald Reagan, instead of Vietnam flashbacks, he's having old Hollywood flashbacks, and he's thinking that like everyone that works for him is like some old actor.
Yeah, I've heard a good deal of his stuff on Reagan, and yeah. I mean, that's one thing I really enjoyed though about Williams. And actually, speaking of Robin Williams and comedy, the comedian Mark Maron posted within, less than a day after the news of Robin Williams' death, he reposted his 2010 interview with Robin Williams on his podcast with a aside at the beginning and end where he just about breaks down in tears, going over his experience with it and how that interview in particular was a life changer for him. I actually found an article. He did an interview for Slate magazine, and I'm going to read a few of these lines here because I think this is something that's kind of important to tell, and it gives you an idea of the kind of attitude Robin Williams had, and how he and Mark Maron kind of, were in a way they were, spiritual brothers within the comedy community. The article begins like this. A few years ago, Robin Williams was on Mark Maron's What the Fuck podcast, chatting about long ago days in the San Francisco comedy scene. At one point, Williams mentioned a comic named Freaky Ralph Eno, who lit himself on fire. To close? Mark Maron asked, thinking maybe this was his concluding flourish to Eno's usual stage act. No, Williams said briefly, taken aback at the question. To end his life. It's maybe my favorite moment in the many great interviews Maron has conducted on What the Fuck. Incredibly dark, but darkly funny, the two began to chuckle uncontrollably and riffed for a bit about how only a comic would have thought Williams was talking about the man's act. But seriously, folks, Williams quipped, I'll be here till 5 minutes from now. And yeah, it's. I think that's a good intro to it. The podcast, the interview that Maron did with Williams in 2010, is a really deep, I would say, look into kind of you get an idea of what Williams was struggling with, and he's joking through it all, but you can tell even without the afterthought of knowing that he has now taken his life, he brings up depression and suicide on several occasions throughout the podcast, and while joking about it, you almost get the sense that these are things that have definitely crossed his mind, and it's just depressing to me that he reached the point where he had to follow through in his own mind with he felt he had to follow through with his those thoughts.
I think that's a pretty great way to transition into the episode of Louie that he guest starred in, which really, his appearance on Louie plays out a lot like a little short film.
It does. I actually watched
like 8
that.
Minutes?
I watched that last night. You sent me the link.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you explain it a little bit for people?
There's not a lot of setup. It opens with Louie walking to this grave. I don't. Was there a funeral, or was that was supposed to be after?
Right. It took place after the funeral of someone who both he and Robin Williams knew.
It was a club owner, right?
Yeah, the club owner of a comedy club.
And Robin Williams shows up at the guy's grave, and they have a little moment together. And then they go out to lunch, and they're just kind of bullshitting and talking about what an asshole this guy was. And they get into how there was this one strip club that he really loved to go to. So they go over there, and they're hanging out there. And they mention...
Now, I think it's important to mention, the reason that they bond over this is they were really a couple of the only people who attended this guy's funeral.
Yeah.
And even though they thought the guy was kind of an asshole, they had that feeling of obligation. And it was something kind of... it was strange that they felt that. And the reason they go to this strip club was for that same reason. They were thinking, no one that we know has ever followed him to that, even though he invited us all the time.
Right.
And so they said, well, let's go check this out and see what this was all about.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So they go there. They kind of, they look like they've just come from a funeral. So one of the strippers asks, what's wrong? And they say the name of the guy, or no, they say somebody that used to come here a lot died. And the stripper says, I've worked here for 10 years. What's the guy's name? And they tell him the guy's name, and it just devastates the whole place. Like, they go from person to person saying this person died. They go to the DJ. The DJ starts playing Sister Christian by Night Ranger, and they have a memorial for the guy.
Even the bouncers are in tears.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they have a moment where they leave. They leave the strip club, and
as soon as they walk out the door, they start laughing.
Right, because he had a whole life out at a strip club where people loved him, which is just fascinating. And then the most prophetic moment occurs where and Williams brings up the proposition of, whoever goes first, you'll attend my funeral, right?
And they agreed. And I think in real life, Louis C.K. is going to attend his funeral.
I wouldn't be surprised. That's yeah.
It's really poignant. It's really poignant. It's an episode of Louis. It's from season 3. It's on Netflix. I forget the title. But the first 8 minutes of the episode is Robin Williams' appearance. Mm-hmm. And that on its own, it's like this little short film. It's beautiful.
You can watch it. I believe someone edited it down on YouTube. And
yes, I don't know how long that's going to be up there, but it is on YouTube right now.
I think for posterity, it's important to at least have viewed that. And since we're talking television appearances, before we get into movies, a Robin Williams performance that really impacted me, which I didn't even see this performance until years after it aired on television. I was a big fan of the TV show The Wire, and I heard that the creators of The Wire also created the show that came before it, but on network TV, Homicide: Life on the Street. And so I actually bought a couple seasons of Homicide at a discount and found out that he's in the debut episode of season 2. And his performance in this episode is one of the most powerful performances I've ever seen Robin Williams have. It's the first episode of Homicide, it's worth noting, that focuses on a character other than the police officers, and so it's a very significant episode for that purpose, but his character is an out-of-towner who's in Baltimore with his family, just on vacation, which it does make you wonder who goes to Baltimore on vacation, but who knows, maybe there was family in town or something. But they get mugged, and his wife gets killed right in front of himself and his children. And the entire rest of the episode is basically following Robin Williams and his 2 children as they go through the painful process of a police interview, of coping with what has just happened, of figuring out funeral arrangements, and Robin Williams' job, I mean, he at this point becomes making sure his children cope as best as they can with what they've just seen. He has 1 boy and 1 girl, and the boy, by the way, is played by an incredibly young Jake Gyllenhaal.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, there's a scene with that on YouTube right now. You can probably look it up at your leisure. But the entire film, or the entire episode, plays like a little short film, and you don't have to have seen any other episode of Homicide to understand it. So, if you're looking for a powerful, dramatic performance, pure dramatic, there isn't very much humor in it. Actually, in kind of a stark and dark contrast, the subplot of it that deals with the police characters is about how police officers use a dark sense of humor to try to escape the demons of their job. And there's a point where Robin Williams' character overhears some of the jokes being told, and it becomes an even darker episode just for that. So, obviously we're not talking light drama. It's a very heavy episode, but it's some of the best television that I've ever seen, and really ahead of its time. So, with that said, I think do we have any other non-film performances or anything that we want to mention? So why don't we move on to the films of Robin Williams which impacted us the most? Bill Leon, I'll let you lead off with this. What films of his would you say impacted you the most, and choose one to go into a discussion about?
All right, this is lower on my list. This isn't like top tier, but I've always been a fan of the movie Hook.
Okay.
And Hook is a movie. It has its problems, but Robin Williams is charming as shit in that movie. The cast, like pretty much the whole cast, isn't the problem of that movie. Like Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, They all turn in great performances, but the transition that Robin Williams' character goes through in that movie, how he's kind of this hard-boiled adult that has to learn to be very childlike, that was very effectively done, and he plays it very charmingly throughout the whole movie. Hook is more of a personal choice, just because it's something I grew up with, and I mean that's like, if I think Robin Williams, I think Hook, and that's obviously I am a child of the '90s in that way.
You know what? I'm actually with you on this in that when I was Hook does have a lot of problems as a film, but honestly, it manages in more ways than it probably in all right should. It manages some very interesting things with character, and exploring the characters of the Neverland universe. I think it has some excellent performances from Maggie Smith, who apparently she's been 90 years old forever. Because this movie came out in 1991, and I think she looked older in that film than she looks now.
Yeah, she looks younger in the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah. And you have Dustin Hoffman as, in my opinion, the definitive Captain Hook.
I'm going to take issue with that just because the 2D one is like a master of slapstick.
I don't know. I think
go back and watch Disney's Peter Pan. Him and that crocodile they're fucking modern day Charlie Chaplin.
It's all right. I'm not gonna fault it either. I will fault the animated film for the single most racist element of Disney films, which are
not
allowed to be released.
That's not true.
I would argue the "What Made the Red Man Red" song is more racist than "Song of the South." "Song of the South" is not as bad as its.
This isn't the time or place to have this discussion. You're fueling the fire right now. Like, I want to come at you with everything, but I'm going to be respectful. We're going to move past this.
All right. And Bob Hoskins as Smee, also fantastic. So
yeah,
I think we mentioned that during the Bob Hoskins.
We did, and again, going back to the animated version, there's not a whole lot to the Smee character, but Bob Hoskins really kind of shaped it and made it a rounded character.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a lot to say about that. Interesting note, it looks like there's a bunch of rock stars randomly in the movie. It looks like David Crosby is in it. It looks like
Phil Collins is in it.
Yeah,
I know
Phil
that.
Collins is in it.
Yeah. I knew about Phil Collins. And then there's the couple kissing on the bridge, George Lucas and Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, interesting. A young Gwyneth Paltrow plays the young Wendy.
Yes.
So this was a movie with a ton of.
I think she only has one line where she goes, "Peter."
Yeah, that's. I think you're right with that. But yeah, I liked Hook. What about you, Bill Arsenault? You've been quiet.
What about Hook?
Yeah, how do you feel about Hook?
God, it's been a while since I've seen that film.
I've seen it, so I go back and rewatch it at least every 2 years.
I think I may have seen it in the drive-in. I'm trying to remember it. I remember liking it. I remember preferring the scenes where Robin Williams' character, Peter Pan, right? He's the grown-up Peter Pan.
Yeah,
he doesn't remember that he used to be Peter Pan.
Yeah, his real-world name is Peter Banning.
Right. Okay. And my favorite scene that I can recall, there were two of them. There was the one where he's meeting Tinkerbell, Julia Roberts,
where she grows to full size.
Yeah. Right. And there was the other one where they're all having like a kids' dinner with the other little kids, the Neverland kids or whatever, and he doesn't see the food at first.
But he has a great quip. He's like, Gandhi ate more than this.
Right. And he starts looking at it and more closely and trying to think like a kid, and then finally the smorgasbord appears before him, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
And apparently all they have to eat is paint and ice cream. That's what it looks like.
Which is a weird motif, because you think about what dreams may come, and there's a lot of paint in that movie too. So maybe that's something Robin Williams liked. But
I think that'd be a good segue. Is that on your list, Bill?
is that on my list? Yes and no. Like it's not. It's on my list.
It's another imperfect movie with some really wonderful elements and some elements that are not as wonderful.
What is on my list is a movie I know you guys I think are very divisive on, Toys.
Oh yeah, very very divisive.
Yeah,
Throw this at
Toys is
very very divisive.
I will say this: it's a lot of fun to watch and question what's going on.
I'll give you that.
I never had
I'll
a
let you
problem.
talk there.
I never had a problem questioning what was going on. I think I got it as a kid. I just completely understood it. Maybe as a grown-up, I won't be able to understand it, but as a kid, I remember never having a question in my mind about what was occurring on.
Which is interesting because
screen.
it's not a kids movie.
It's not a kids movie at all, but I was never really like a kid. I was always this weird anomaly of a person. You know, my mom always said that I was kind of a
Are
young.
you Benjamin Button? Are you constantly getting younger?
She would say I was like a grandpa. I had the grandpa mentality, you know. But like I was always like the kid who was not climbing trees, but was always like, why climb a tree? You could get hurt.
When you could curse the people standing on your lawn and.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I was usually that guy, like questioning, like, why the hell would you do that? You could get hurt.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you bring up Toys. Have you guys both seen the trailer for Toys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sells you a different movie than what Toys is, especially Robin Williams' character in it.
I don't know. I mean, are we talking about the trailer where he's in that field?
Yes.
And it's just the blue sky, and he's talking to the camera.
He's talking, but he's supposed to be Robin Williams. He's like, I'm on the set of this Hollywood movie.
Which was done a lot in that time frame.
Yeah, we don't see trailers like that anymore. Now it's all the movie. You know, it's not
that Maximum Overdrive trailer. That's something special.
Yeah, real. Okay, all right, that's a good point. But Toys, no, I don't know how I understood it, but I was able to. But now looking back on it, what I remember the most was the funeral sequence in the beginning with Robin Williams' dad, and Robin Williams' character was a little sad, but at the same time, they were fulfilling his dad's wishes, which was like a Jim Henson funeral, and I got that immediately when I saw it as a kid. I was like, oh, okay, this guy doesn't want anyone feeling that bad at his funeral. He wants everyone to kind of remember the good stuff. So his coffin is laughing, which is a little creepy, but I got it. I
get it. No, don't get me wrong. I get it. It's just presented in kind of this awkward way, and that's how the whole movie is. It's like, I get what you're trying to do. You're just not presenting it in the best possible way. Or you filtered it through this Tim Burton lens, which happens a lot. There's a lot of Toys that looks like Tim Burton stuff.
There's a good bit of it that is Tim Burton-ish. You know, like that stuff. But there's also some weird shit, like at the end where the what's the bad guy's name? The general or whatever.
It's his uncle. I don't remember the character.
The admiral or whatever.
It's Michael Gambon that plays him.
Yeah. He like gets knocked out or something, and he ends up in a vet's ward for like mentally ill people or something. And I thought that's kind of a downer. Like even for the bad guy, that's not a good way to go out, you know. But then again, maybe it is a good way because that was kind of like the ending of Brazil, you know, where it was like bad for the character, but also at the same time a little good for the character because he kind of can revert back into his mind a little bit. So yeah, it's an odd. My favorite, aside from the funeral, my favorite bit in Toys is the music video trick they play on the security guard.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I know it doesn't, but it kind of does a little bit. I mean, I still recall it. I was like, oh, okay, they're trying to trick the security guards by doing like a goofy music video. And the music video is like, how does it feel?
Yeah.
That's just an illusion.
That movie's filled to the brim with weird music because it starts out with all the workers in the factory singing a song, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
They have this like cult-like drone work song that they're singing.
It's a strange, dark detour of a movie,
And that's part of what I liked about it, and in a weird way, that's part of what I liked about Robin Williams so much, is his presence among the darkness. If that makes any sense.
it does. And
It makes
actually,
perfect sense.
I'd like to segue with that.
Okay.
I'd like to segue into one of my picks for a movie of his that was really influential on me relatively recently, within the last 5 years. And it's kind of hard to talk about it now because of how prophetic it is. Has anyone seen World's Greatest Dad?
I've seen most of it, and I know what you're talking about, but
Well, I'll lead off with the plot just for those who don't know. World's Greatest Dad. In it, Robin Williams is a struggling writer and a single father, whose son is basically a complete prick. He really only cares about video games and internet porn.
and internet porn. Yeah.
He's an asshole to everybody.
His son is kick-ass?
No.
His son is an asshole.
Yeah.
His son is played by the kid who was in Spy Kids.
Yeah. So anyway, one day his father comes home, and this is where it gets a little difficult. He comes home and finds that his son is hanging to his death in his bedroom.
From autoerotic asphyxiation.
So the title, oh my god, the title is super dark and ironic.
Yeah, he comes home and finds his kid has died masturbating due to autoerotic asphyxiation.
So what the dad does is
Whoa.
like he decides to kind of cover it up, like I don't want people to know my son died this way.
Right.
So he writes the suicide note.
He writes his own son's suicide note,
And it's very poetic, and it's very deep, and
because
all
remember
that
he's a
stuff.
writer, so
He's a struggling writer, and so he uses and so he puts it out there, and people are like, "Oh my God, your son was so deep, and we're so sorry for your loss." And Robin Williams almost kind of uses this as a way to jumpstart his own writing career.
And so he starts writing all of these fake journal entries and posting them of things that his son wrote.
Never said, right?
That basically turn him from this universally hated person into this folk icon where all the kids in the school think he was such a misunderstood person. We love him so much. And that builds to a 4, which I don't want to ruin because I highly recommend you watch this.
Yeah, I didn't know the premise of this, but I'm gonna go watch.
This is a Bobcat Goldthwait movie.
Yeah, and
didn't know
Bobcat
that.
Goldthwait is one of the most unique indie filmmakers out there right now. His films, even if they're not great, are at least interesting.
Mhm.
And in World's Greatest Dad, I think it's his masterpiece.
Now, I'd like to get into the what I said about his presence among the darkness.
Yes.
This movie in particular, there was a moment in the trailer, and I think it's in the movie, where they're all around he and a couple other teachers or friends are sitting at a restaurant,
Mhm.
and this guy is talking about, I think, parenting or something, and Robin Williams is taking a sip of a drink, and he just starts chuckling very softly. Like, and it's very intense
Mhm.
in how soft it is, and then he realizes how awkward it is that he's laughing at this moment, so he looks around and he's just kind of like, like okay, I should probably stop laughing, but he can't help but laugh, and there was something very dark about that, but at the same time, something very human
Yeah,
going on, like
definitely.
that. It's that. I don't know that. I can't imagine any other comedian bringing that out personally.
I do want to say one other thing about the movie that I really appreciate. Is a strange aside. You almost get the feeling Goldthwait wrote this into the screenplay specifically to highlight a musician that he really likes. Is at least 5 times in the movie the musician and songwriter Bruce Hornsby is brought up to the point where he even has a cameo at the end of the film, and and Robin Williams' character in it is obsessed with, like, he really loves Bruce Hornsby, and the movie actually, I had never even heard the guy's name, although it turned out I knew some of his music. I'd heard it when I looked it up. After I saw this movie, I went out and started listening to it, and now I rather love Bruce Hornsby. So
That's just the way it is.
that's right. That's one of the songs of his I totally
know.
didn't know was what. I had no clue that was Bruce Hornsby, and then it's like, and then Jacob's Ladder also.
They used the song "That's Just the Way It Is." They kind of retweaked that to make the theme song for the college and community. So that's and they use his name, so that's why I know who he is.
Either way, you know what? It's a it's a fantastic dark movie, and you're right, Bill. It explores. I think it gave Robin Williams a chance to explore the dark side of comedy and the dark side of.
What year did this come out?
Relatively recently. It came out in 2009.
Raise your hand if Death to Smoochie's on your list.
It didn't make my list, but it's up there. If you want to talk about that next, we can.
I unfortunately have not seen Death to Smoochie.
What?
I know, but maybe
Jon
we should do a
Stewart is in it, and
maybe we should do a commentary of it. I don't know.
It's a rocket ship. Yeah, I would love to do a commentary on that one.
Fuck it, yeah, Death to Smoochie. I don't even. I saw the poster for this before I knew anything about it, and I could just tell by the poster. If you guys don't know, the poster is a guy in a foam animal costume underneath a black blanket, like he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
also,
not a very good poster, honestly.
the horn for the costume is sticking out of the blanket, so that intrigued me because it looked like Barney the dinosaur, and I was like, oh, is Barney the dinosaur dead? I have to see this movie. I was like 12 or 13. I was super fucking young when this came out.
Mm-hmm.
But then I saw the movie, and it completely blew me away. Over the years, I know a lot of it's popped up on a lot of bad movie lists, and it really doesn't get the recognition or the respect that it deserves. But
very much in the same area that you were putting Toys. This is a misunderstood movie in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Death to Smoochie. I mean, first of all, it's probably my favorite Danny DeVito directed feature.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite Edward Norton performances.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite Robin Williams performances, all in one. And even though it didn't quite make my list, I definitely love this movie. Let me ask you, what is it that first attracted you to seeing the movie?
I, to this day, just because I'm into animation, I get exposed to a lot of children's programming.
Mm-hmm.
That's just always been, like, you know what I mean? I kind of keep track of that shit.
For Bill Arsenault's purposes, why don't we go over a little bit of what the movie's about?
Right, okay. Well, Robin Williams plays Rainbow Randolph, who, when the movie begins, he's the biggest children's television show on TV. And, like, the movie opens with, like, his show, and they perform this little song. And then at the end of that, there's just, like, tons of merchandise. Like, buy this, buy that, buy the cereal, buy the soap, buy everything. And then it cuts to Robin Williams accepting a bribe from some parents to, like, get their kid to do extra shit on the show. And he gets busted for that, and his show gets taken away. And the network is basically like, okay, that blew up in our face. We need a new child star. We need a new guy to launch into the stratosphere and make the biggest fucking name in children's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this big list of people that I've guessed they might have had auditions from over the years, or like people that have come to them, approach them.
They're looking for someone who's squeaky clean.
They use the term squeaky clean. The old guy's like, squeaky fucking clean! Which, that's a great line. But also, yeah, Jon Stewart's got a little role in the movie. And
he plays great. An executive.
Yeah, he's great in it. But anyway, so Edward Norton plays... the dude's actual name is escaping me, but the character he does is Smoochie, who's this magenta rhino that plays songs. And Catherine Keener, who works for the studio, goes down to find him. He's playing guitar for meth addicts at a rehab clinic, and one of the first song you see him playing is like, "We'll get you off that smack, oh yes we will. Yes, we'll get you off that smack, oh yes we will." It's super dark, but and I was so young when I saw this, but this is definitely a movie that shaped my sort of lean towards more dark humor. And so anyway, Edward Norton's character gets brought to the studio. Basically, you know, they do this whole montage, and like now he's got his show. His show blows up, and he's the biggest entertainer in children's television. And Robin Williams' character, Rainbow Randolph, is this like bum alcoholic who he can't even. He's
goes insane.
Yeah, he goes completely insane. And this. There are probably other Robin Williams performances you could say are more insane, but this was a pretty intense role. There are times in the movie where he's borderline scary.
Borderline? I think he goes a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
He's literally at the movie Death to Smoochie. Basically, he gets to the point where he's decided he's going to kill Edward Norton or get him killed.
He's obsessed with Smoochie, and he wants revenge. And that's your basic premise, is that you have the one guy fell, the other guy rises, and he wants revenge now. So that's as much setup as you need. But it is really dark. It deals with children's entertainment and what may or may not go on behind the scenes of that.
Well, there was a famous incident in, I think, the 50s or 60s. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Where a children's TV host, and the name's evading me now, so forgive me if I can't name him, but on television, he basically told children to send him money.
Oh, I remember this, yeah. I don't
And
remember the guy's name, but I remember this incident.
he basically said, go to your... He basically told kids on television how to steal money from their parents, put it in an envelope, and send it to him. And it completely ruined his career. And even though it was ostensibly a joke, I think it was meant as a riff, it ignited a fire. And I think that's contrasted with, say, Fred Rogers, who lived his life... he is basically Smoochie the Rhino, in that he's a completely squeaky clean individual.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I would like to comment on that for a second. Edward Norton... he is this super conservative, just clean performer.
Conservative, but not overbearing.
Yeah, and what they do throughout the course of the movie is they just take him through this roller coaster ride of darkness throughout the world of children's television, and he goes through a transformation. By the end of the movie, he's considering blowing a guy's head off.
You're right. He's driven to the abyss. And it's just fascinating to watch, you know, the idea of how children's television does this to people. Not to give away too much, but there's a scene involving a Nazi rally, and
I mentioned this when we reviewed El Dorado. They kind of ripped that off a little bit, but
it's a work of brilliance. So, Bill, do you have what else do you have on your list?
Which Bill?
Bill A.
Oh. I guess the next one would be his performance as the Doctor in 9 Months.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that kind of an odd... And no, I'm not looking at his Wikipedia filmography. Yes, I am. But, no, I'm being a little serious here. Well, actually, no, I'm not.
Is this a dramatic movie?
9 Months is
9 Months? No, it's a Hugh Grant, Julianne Moore comedy where
I've never heard of it.
Didn't say anything more than Hugh Grant. If Hugh Grant,
yeah.
If it's a Hugh Grant movie where he's starring, you know automatically what it is, unless it's Clueless, in which case you have no clue what you're getting into.
Right. That was pretty funny in terms of a Hugh Grant type movie.
Technically, he's not the star of that, but still.
Right, and I wouldn't want him to be the star of that, but he does play a cannibal. So
he's fantastic in it, actually, in every way.
He's pretty good in it, but no. In 9 Months is about Hugh Grant and Julianne Moore. They have sex, and she gets pregnant, and it's about them going through the pregnancy. And Robin
So-
Williams plays their doctor, and he's kind of a goofy doctor. I forget if he's a foreign person. I think he is, right? I think he might be German or something. But there are two bits in the movie that stuck out to me. There's one where they get to the hospital just in time for the pregnancy to happen, and for the birth to happen, and they're like, "You got to get my wife a room. You got to get my wife a room." And the doctor, Robin Williams, is like, he's like, "Look all around you. It's a full moon. Women are having birth all over the place." You know, he's talking about like the moon and all this other shit, and I remember busted out laughing, like thinking this is the stupidest explanation you could give. But then again, maybe there's some credence to it. I don't know. So they go through the birth, and everything goes well, and when we see Robin Williams again, he's drunk, and he's like, "Okay, now I'm gonna circumcise your son," and he walks off and goes to circumcise the guy's son, and it's the smallest of references. It's the smallest thing to bring up, but it's kind of like one of those bit parts, kind of like actors do bit parts every once in a while, where it's in a movie that really they're kind of above.
Like Robin Williams is in Tu Wan Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
Exactly.
And in that movie, he is John Jacob
Jingleheimer Schmidt. Right, yeah. But I mean, they're able to bring something out of what's been written for them and make it at least moderately entertaining. And that was something he did pretty well. And not everything he does had to be super exceptional, but even in the smallest of ways, they kind of were a little exceptional. And this, I think, was a good example of that. It was small, but it was just right.
Yeah, and I mean, I have not seen 9 Months, but on that recommendation, I'd be willing to give it a watch.
If
the movie itself isn't that good, but his performance is okay.
Yeah, his performance in it is okay. I would say there were some funny moments, like with Hugh Grant, and there's a scene in there where Hugh Grant and what's his face, Tom Arnold, are walking down they're in a department store because they play the male counterpart to two women that are also having, about to give birth, and they're walking through a department store, and this guy in a mascot uniform is like, "Hey there, buddy, how about I get you a T-shirt, or how about I give you this?" Just some guy giving out samples of shit, and they're like, "Okay, look, buddy, we don't want any of your stuff," and the guy's like, "Go fuck yourselves," So they get into a fist fight with this department store mascot, and it's Tom Arnold and Hugh Grant, so that's the movie basically. It's just them getting into weird scrapes. It's I don't know if I'd recommend it, but I mean, just on Robin Williams' performance, maybe there's a YouTube cut where it's just Robin Williams. I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah. Well, another movie that I'd like to mention, and this isn't a movie that's making the top of my list. Actually, what I'm going to do now, really quick, is rapid fire through some underrated Robin Williams films before I get to like my top films to discuss.
Is Cadillac Man one of them?
That was actually what I was going to discuss next.
Seriously, awesome. All right.
Cadillac Man is a highly underrated film that came out. I kind of call the early '90s a time of dark comedies involving terrorism, because you had Cadillac Man, which is a movie where Robin Williams plays a used car salesman, and he winds up getting held hostage by by
Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins. Robin Williams, Tim Robbins. Whoa, that just
Does True Lies fall into that category?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Also, Falling Down.
Oh, dude, I love Falling Down.
If you've ever seen Amos and Andrew with Nicolas Cage and Samuel L. Jackson.
I have.
Yeah, okay, I have. Yeah.
That one is a weird one. Amos and Andrew, I'll give just a really... Amos and Andrew is basically... the police see Samuel L. Jackson in... the police of this like wealthy kind of Martha's Vineyard like island, see Samuel L. Jackson in a big mansion, and immediately assume, because he's black, that he's robbing the place, when he's actually the owner of the place. And somehow Nicolas Cage gets involved in it, and it turns into a standoff. It's a weird fucking movie. Anyway, Cadillac Man. Describing it really quickly. Very underrated comedy. It's got some really creative writing, and the performances from both Tim Robbins and Robin Williams I think they play off of each other very well. It's kind of a who's who of early 90s like character actors in the movie. Even Fran Drescher, which, depending on your opinion, may or may not have been a good idea. But yeah. So other movies though of his that I consider underrated that are worth mentioning. I have to say that his performance in and this is another Bobcat Goldthwait. Has anyone seen Shakes the Clown?
No.
I've seen some of it.
Yeah, that's a...
This isn't anything like Vulgar, is it?
No.
Thank
No.
fucking God.
It's definitely dark, but it's not vulgar dark.
You don't like Vulgar, Bill Leon?
I saw it as a teenager. Maybe I'll have to look at it again, but it was a really...
Vulgar is a movie that's kind of hard to like. It's a movie about a clown who gets raped. I mean, Jesus, that's...
I know, but I mean, like, it's not... I don't think it's hard to like. I think it's hilarious. I mean, come on.
So anyway, another underrated Robin Williams movie. This is a comedy that is... it's from the 80s, the mid-'80s, and it's an underrated comedy. The story itself is complete just whatever. I think I already talked about this in my Harold Ramis rant, though, earlier. Club Paradise.
Oh, yeah, I used to watch this a lot on Comedy Central.
Yeah, it was on a lot. Club Paradise is basically just an excuse for a bunch of comedians to have humorous segments.
Isn't Eugene Levy in it?
Yes.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
Eugene Levy is one of the funniest characters in it. Eugene Levy, basically, he and Rick Moranis play a couple of inner city New York Jews who are basically they go to this island specifically to get weed.
SCTV alum.
And they fail miserably in their many attempts to score weed until they finally find a gigantic garbage bag full of it.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
It's the movie's ridiculous. It's got a kind of a cool soundtrack. The music in it's some classic reggae. Jimmy Cliff is actually a supporting character in it. Peter O'Toole plays the British governor of the island.
Yes, I was hoping you would bring that up.
Oh, I love Peter O'Toole. I can't not mention it. And the ostensibly the plot is Robin Williams, who is the star of it. Basically, he plays a Chicago fireman who gets traumatized by an experience during a fire and decides to take an early retirement and move out to the islands. And he ends up buying into Jimmy Cliff's failing resort. And the rest of the movie is really just a bunch of different comedians come to this resort, and you get to watch a lot of very funny things happen. It's not a perfect comedy, but it's a Saturday morning comedy. You put it on TV, you laugh.
Yeah, I agree.
And anyway, and one more underrated Robin Williams movie that I'd like to mention. I'm actually pulling up here so I can name the cast list. His performance is probably, and I hate to say this, it's an underrated film. His performance could have been reined in a little bit, but it's not without its merits. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Now, technically, he's not even credited in the movie, even though he's a very significant part of one sequence. He plays the King of the Moon in the movie. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen was Terry Gilliam's third movie in what he kind of called his Dreams trilogy. And it's the one that notoriously failed at the box office and ended up clocking in at almost twice its original budget. Through really not through Terry Gilliam's fault. There were a lot of problems in the production that screwed it up, and there was some back dealing with producers. But he took the blame for it. And the movie has a fantastic cast, great performances, particularly by the star John Neville, who plays the aforementioned Baron. If you're not familiar with the fairy tales, Baron Munchausen is basically a character of Germanic folklore who there's a series of children's stories where he plays this. It's sort of, I would describe it as sort of the German version of Don Quixote. He sort of claims to have done all of these great big accomplishments that are increasingly ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So he claims to have, for instance, flown to the moon on a hot air balloon and met the king and queen of the moon. He claims to have gone to hell and won a deal with the devil. He claims to have been blown out of the blowhole of a whale. And he claims to have single-handedly fought off the Turkish invasion of Europe. And the movie very much has that storybook feel to it. Highly recommended. Robin Williams is only in it for about 15 minutes, but his performance, it's basically just an excuse for him to riff on insanity and cocaine for about 15 minutes. He doesn't talk cocaine, but he's clearly on it. In the role.
I don't mean to sound brash here, but that's kind of a recurring thing for him in the 80s.
Yeah, this movie came out in 1987, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I was saying, that live at the Met, that stand-up from '86, I'm pretty sure he's on coke through all of it. And I mean, I can't say I wasn't there, I don't know, but he is way, way more energized than I have ever seen him.
Mm-hmm. Either way, another thing that's notable about Baron Munchausen, it's Uma Thurman's first performance in which she plays Venus. And she's naked in it, and she was 17 when the movie was made.
Oh, I gotta get this.
Yeah. A little bit worrying that her parents signed off on this, but it was made in Europe, so they're a little bit looser on regulations.
Oh.
Take my daughter, please. That was me being loose.
All right, so we're down to. I think we should wrap things up with each of us should name. Let's just say should name our top 2 films of his, if we haven't already.
Okay.
Oh man.
See, because there's 2 that I'd like to talk about, but one of them isn't what I would say top tier. The one I would say is top tier would be Death to Smoochie.
Okay. All right.
But the other one I really want to talk about is a movie that's not very good, but his performance in it is very good, and that's Popeye.
Okay. It's on Netflix, by the way.
Popeye, I don't know that much about Robert Altman. I know that he's done a lot of movies. He did Bonnie and Clyde with Warren Beatty, right?
I don't believe he directed it.
No.
But he did a lot of fantastic films.
He did Nashville. He did The Prairie Home Companion.
He's a very well-regarded filmmaker.
Yeah, very well regarded.
He did The Player with Tim Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
He did McCabe. What's that?
McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
McCabe and Mrs. Miller, right? Yeah.
Now,
fantastic film.
The thing I really don't understand about Popeye, and I'm asking here because I don't think that this ever happened, but was there ever a stage production of this before they went to film with it?
Not as far as I know.
Why? Why is it a musical? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that guy, but like Popeye live action musical, you got 3 Popeye in live action. That's all you need. Don't make it a fucking musical with Harry Nilsson being the laziest that he's ever been. Sorry, Nilsson fans, but yeah, the Popeye. The one song I do admittedly kind of like in it is Robin Williams' song. That's Popeye. I Am What I Am, and that's only because him doing Popeye, him being Popeye, really comes through in the whole performance. But I mean, of all the songs in the film, that's the one where you're like, okay, this is a song Popeye would sing.
I'll have to give it a look. The old movie guide rather is kinder to Harry Nilsson than you're being, so I'll have to. I'm curious to hear the music.
You guys have both seen Punch Drunk Love.
Yes.
You know the song "He Needs Me"?
Yeah.
That's from Popeye.
Yeah, I know.
That song sucks. And Shelley Duvall, why? Shelley Duvall is she's really annoying in like everything.
Shelley Duvall is...
What, even in The Shining?
Especially in The Shining.
Well, that was on purpose, I think, because she was supposed to drive Jack Nicholson a little crazy.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that she drove Stanley Kubrick crazy on set.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, granted, Kubrick kind of beat the shit out of her on set, too. So.
Aside from Robin Williams, I can't remember the guy's name. The guy, he plays Cheryl's father on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Paul Dooley, I think, is his name. Is that right?
Not sure. I can bring up the Popeye thing. And...
He plays Wimpy, the guy that loves the hamburgers.
Paul Dooley, you got the name right.
He's a good character actor. He was good as Wimpy. The guy that plays Bluto is like whatever, and Shelley Duvall as Olive was terrible. But Robin Williams and Paul Dooley really nailed down their characters, and I'm not a big fan of translating, especially something like Popeye that is so cartoony, to live action. But their performances, again, like if they had maybe made different decisions, like this won't be a musical, and
if there was anyone to play Popeye, I would say Robin Williams would probably have been the best choice.
Think about this, like the prosthetics they put on him for his arms and everything like that. It looks fine on Robin Williams. I can't imagine it being on anyone else. It would probably look ridiculous. I mean, it looks
CGI nowadays.
That's true too.
Motion captured the arms.
This is a big aside, but I will say this: Gendy Tartakovsky, who's a fantastic animator, is doing a Popeye reboot that's going to be in CG.
CG. Oh, well, I don't know.
Gendy Tartakovsky is a ridiculously talented animator, so I have nothing but high hopes.
Okay.
We'll see. So, do you have any others, Bill? Another one to highlight?
Yeah. Probably number one of all time for me would have to be Aladdin.
Okay.
Because the thing about Aladdin is like I was saying earlier about his stand-up and his energy, they put him in a recording studio, recorded his voices, and let him go crazy, and then they animated to that. And they did it brilliantly. Like, him as the genie is like... It's one of those rare moments, especially with getting celebrity voice actors to voice characters, where the voice and the character and the animation all come together like brilliantly. Mm-hmm. As far as casting big-name actors to do voice work, that very rarely ever happens.
Yeah, usually it's just stunt casting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely will grant you that is probably the highlight of Aladdin. I think it's... There are problems to the movie outside of that I won't mention. What I will say is that his performance, just really from beginning to end, really embodied sort of the goofy Disney supporting character, and set sort of a new standard for it, a standard that to this day people have been trying to meet with. I mean, you have your...
Well, I mean, even Disney themselves... I hate to do this because I do like the movie Mulan, and I don't mind Eddie Murphy as Mushu. But Eddie Murphy as Mushu was them trying to replicate Robin Williams as the genie.
Or, say, Donkey in Shrek.
Yeah, that was Katzenberg, though, and he's a piece of shit, so...
But, yeah, I really do enjoy the genie in Aladdin. It's... Honestly, when I was a kid, I watched the direct-to-DVD movies, and I didn't even realize until recently that Robin Williams didn't do the second one. It was Dan Castellaneta.
Well, the thing about that one, it was a direct-to-video movie, but at the same time, it was more so a pilot for the animated series.
Right.
which Dan Castellaneta also did the voice of the genie on.
But then they did bring Williams back for the third Aladdin movie.
His bits in that, I mean, that movie has its problems, but he is funny in that. They get way more pop culture heavy than they were in Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like,
although there is that, I don't know if you've heard that Disney fan theory that the movie Aladdin has to take place in the future because the genie like makes some pop culture references that are impossible to have existed in the ancient Middle East, and so
that's why it's
possible
funny.
Explanation is that the movie takes place in the future.
But again, that's a really brilliant thing that you bring up, is that Robin Williams was playing this character in an old time, making these modern day references, and that is something.
This was really the first time that I can think of that happened.
It is, but that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that sparked this need for that in animated films in the '90s, where there's like Quest for Camelot. We need Eric Idle and Don Rickles to play dragons that impersonate Elvis. No, you fucking don't. Make your movie. It worked in Aladdin. It's not necessarily going to work for you. There's a whole slew. Even Robin Williams in Ferngully kind of did it. I mean, that takes place in modern day, arguably, but he was very much kind of.
The less said about Ferngully, the better, I think. That's almost Troll in Central Park levels of suck. So
I disagree completely on that. Just because I'm not saying Ferngully's good, I'm saying Troll in Central Park is bad.
You're right. It's hard to get worse than that.
Yeah.
So I will go ahead now and mention what I would consider a couple Robin Williams movies that I would recommend. And the fact is, there's so many good films of his to recommend that I hesitate at narrowing it down to just like a top few. So what I'm going to name is the films of his that I think everyone who is a fan of Robin Williams should see. Good Morning Vietnam, I should have highlighted earlier, is a film that it actually got him his first Academy Award nomination, and it from a historical perspective, it's bad history. The character he plays is based on a historical character who was a radio DJ during the Vietnam War, who was known for his outlandish style. Robin Williams basically plays a completely different version of this person, and the events in the film have no bearing on history.
That's not the first time that would happen with Robin Williams, unfortunately.
Right, but the movie, that said, is just that good that you forget, and you can easily forget those elements for the fact that the movie is a sharply written comedy and a satire of military bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. In the film, Robin Williams plays Adrian Cronauer, a radio DJ who is brought in to Vietnam. Basically, the higher-ups are looking for someone who can inject a little bit of fun into the morning for soldiers who are listening to the Armed Forces radio. And his style of comedy is outrageous. He does things like he edits Nixon's speeches. He's supposed to edit highlights from Nixon's speech, and he edits it to make Nixon sound like he's saying curse words and confessing things about his penis and things like that. The movie has a great supporting turn from Bruno Kirby as the completely unfunny lieutenant who oversees Robin Williams' character. And there's a particular scene where he decides, I will take over and I'll be the radio DJ, where he does the single most unfunny DJ that you will ever see, including doing the worst French accent you will ever see. The movie features one of the best Robin Williams lines in which he describes of the lieutenant. He looks at him and says, "You are in more dire need of a blowjob than any white man in history," and walks out. It's a drop the mic moment that this day.
Bill Arsenault, I forget what review it was, but a review of yours cited Gary Glenn Ross and Alec Baldwin's exit in that one scene. You called it like a walk out like a badass moment.
I called it walk out like a hero.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a drop the mic, walk out like a hero moment. You know,
Exactly.
you don't give a fuck. You laid it out. You laid your dick on the table. That, boom, what you got? You know, and that's it. You know, that's what Ken just described is exactly what that is.
And yeah, Good Morning Vietnam also features a great turn from Forrest Whitaker. It has there's a good amount of political commentary in the film that is very potent. A side plot of him befriending a Vietnamese boy who turns out to be a Viet Cong terrorist. And you know what? I really enjoy the movie. It's flawed, of course, and you know it's not very good history, but it's a very good movie. So I will recommend that. I already wrote an entire article about how people should see The Fisher King. I'm not even going to bother talking about The Fisher King because that is by far my favorite Robin Williams film, and I'm just going to say if you haven't seen it, just see it. It's on Netflix. You have no goddamn excuse not to have seen The Fisher King. It's one of Jeff Bridges' best performances, too. So Jeff Bridges, Robin Williams, and Mercedes Ruehl in a Oscar-winning supporting actress performance that is wonderful. It is I mentioned Terry Gilliam already in Baron Munchausen. This film, to just summarize it, The Fisher King is Terry Gilliam. If Terry Gilliam wanted to make a Woody Allen movie, this is how he did it. Because it's a love letter to a storybook love letter to New York City set within a story involving insanity, the quest for the Holy Grail, and a Howard Stern-like radio DJ. So anyway, if that alone doesn't make you watch it, fuck you. I want to mention Moscow on the Hudson really quick as a runner-up. An excellent, sweet movie. Very good performance in Robin Williams. He plays basically a Russian saxophone player who defects to New York, and it's sort of about the American dream. And it's not one of his best movies, but it's a wonderful performance and very fun to watch. I couldn't not highlight that. All right, Bill Arsenault, you get the last pick.
I do. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to go with the what's obvious in my mind, with what seems to work for me, and that's Good Will Hunting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy pick, but I think it's also probably one of the better picks.
Oh, absolutely.
I will throw this out there. Dead Poet Society was filmed in my state, so since he passed, like that, Dead Poet Society, Robin Williams filmed in Delaware, so I'm really glad to not hear not that that's a bad movie.
No,
I do think that Good Will Hunting may be the superior dramatic performance, though.
Right. Well, I remember I think it was on Twitter, and someone posted a picture of people around the putting up a Robin Williams memorial at the bench where they filmed the bench scene between him and Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, and I thought, like, wow, I didn't even know that was a location people knew of. You know, that's pretty interesting. It'd be almost, to me, in my mind, like people going up to the window where Matt Damon goes, do you like apples?
Yeah.
You know, like is that really a place that people know of? But I guess they do in that region. You know, what is it, Boston? Yeah, it's Boston. Mm-hmm. So you know, so that's my pick, Good Will Hunting. It should be pretty obvious why I picked it.
Where else do you get to see Robin Williams choke a guy?
Yeah, for real.
Actually,
probably Insomnia. Did that happen in Insomnia?
Ooh, I don't think he chokes. He
definitely shoots a guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or 1 Hour Photo. I'm pretty sure he does in that.
Yeah.
All great performances, by the way. So we don't want to, just because we didn't mention them doesn't mean they're not good.
Yes. I'd also like to bring up just really, really quickly the Final Cut.
I confuse that with 1 Hour Photo, like, endlessly.
No, it's a movie about a future where they put a chip in your brain, and it records every moment of your life. And a part of this industry is a team of video editors who can look at the chip and edit together a quick memorial. They can edit out all the bad stuff and leave in all the good stuff. And so there are these scenes where he's showing the memorial video to like the friends and family, and one of the friends of this guy is like, he's like, oh, is this where we took that trip on the river? Wow, this is really beautiful. Wait, I thought the river looked like this instead of this. And Robin Williams is like, maybe it did. You know, and I was like, mind blown. But I love that movie because it's about video editors, and you don't really see too many movies that are dramatic about that subject matter, because it's kind of a mundane, very meticulous subject matter.
It's like a motion picture version of Blow Up.
Right, exactly. You know, the only other movie I can think of that deals a little bit in editing is American Movie.
Oh God,
where
that's amazing.
Oh yeah, I know, right? But yeah, I'd bring up. I would recommend the Final Cut, though the ending is a little sappy, but it's still overall pretty good, underrated type movie of Robin Williams. And of course, Toys. Just go see Toys.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't think Toys is without merit, but it's definitely.
It's an oddball of a movie, most
yeah,
definitely.
that script is all over the place, and you can definitely tell that it was made when it was made.
Yeah, but I can't disassociate Robin Williams from that movie. In my head, I just can't, and I smile every time I think of that.
Didn't he do a few movies at that time where he was blonde?
I don't know, Ken?
Didn't he have like a blonde phase when he filmed Toys?
Blonde phase. Well, let's look at his filmography.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think in Toys he might be, but I don't remember.
He's definitely blonde in Toys.
Was he blonde in Shakes the Clown, which came out the same year?
I don't think so, but that's just off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've seen Shakes the Clown.
Mrs. Doubtfire, was he blonde in Mrs. Doubtfire?
Well, if you count the wig that she...
Yeah, if you count the wig, right. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about Mrs. Doubtfire and Jumanji, just a little...
I don't mind Jumanji.
I don't mind Jumanji.
I don't mind Jumanji either.
In fact, I kind of love Jumanji. I'm not gonna lie. It's not perfect, but it's
very fun. Yeah.
For something I saw when I was 10 years old, it sure is something I could watch again.
And there is a nice little sentiment in that movie too about a boy growing into a man and getting over his father issues and stuff. It's actually kind of sweet.
To me, the only thing in the movie that really bugs me to this day is the weird shoe subplot at the beginning of, like, we've just invented the first sneaker. It's like, what?
There's
what is this thing?
I totally lost my train of thought.
We were talking about Jumanji and Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, it was some. Oh, it was Jumanji. Jumanji is based on a book, and the moral of the book is, like, you know how if you don't finish a game of Jumanji, everything that got out of it is still there, and you have to finish the game to get it to go away?
Yeah, it's finish things you start.
Yeah, the moral of the book Jumanji is finish what you start, but that moral is not ever present in the film, like, at all.
No, not at all. But yeah, Jumanji it's an interesting movie. The CGI in it is, by today's standards...
Oh, you know what? I didn't even think of this, but Mrs. Doubtfire opens with him doing voiceover for, like, a cartoon canary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was probably the first time I ever saw a voiceover being performed. That was the first time, as a child, I was ever like, oh, people do these voices.
I have the same reaction. Yeah. So, with that said, I think we've covered Robin Williams in as much detail as we could for just a brief hour. In closing, want to say that, you know, it's a tragedy, really, to see him go, and I was nearly brought to tears when I heard of it because of how deeply his work affected my my own understanding of film and performances, as well as comedy.
I'm sure a lot of other people had this, but the news broke sometime around like 6 or 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I was taking a nap, and I didn't get up till like 8 or 9 o'clock. So I get up and I get on Facebook, and like literally my whole feed is just Robin Williams, Robin Williams, Robin Williams. I was like, Jesus Christ, like, yeah, like, it felt like I had woken up from sleeping for like 10 years, you know?
Yeah, it happened so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that said, we'll be ending our podcast on a bittersweet note tonight, but
Very morose.
with that said, have a great day, and if you feel like you're in the depths of depression, please find help, please. And good night.
Yes.
All right. See ya.